All right. Hopefully, I've successfully started the recording process, which I think I have, and we're all muted. Once again, thank you all for joining us on this Valentine's Day. I appreciate the fact that we are sharing some of our time together, our time that we would normally spend with family and close ones, and that we are here tonight continuing our study. A little earlier this afternoon, I'm sorry, I sent out to you the notes for last week. So hopefully, if you haven't already checked, you have the notes for session number 3. And tonight, believe it or not, it's hard for me to conceive of how quickly these sessions run. Tonight, we are halfway through our course. At the end of this evening, we're halfway through our trimester course. As we study the book of Exodus. You'll notice that tonight I did not give you any readings in the text per se. Initially, I was going to do this in a different way, but last week some of you asked about a lack of material to read, so I suggested that all of you take a look at chapter 18 and 19. Tonight, we will only talk about chapter 18 together, and it will serve as an introduction for the next couple of weeks of sessions where we will talk about the experience of the revelation of the Torah on Mount Sinai to the Jewish people. Tonight, we're going to talk about an episode that comes just before the Sinai stories, and this concerns the aftermath of what we had spoken of earlier, the lessons of the desert. Now, over the last 2 weeks, I've suggested to you that the stories, the experiences of the Jewish people as they crossed the Red Sea and during their 50 days of wandering from Egyptian slavery to Mount Sinai, I suggested to you there are certain lessons that the Jewish people and we who read this story are meant to learn from those experiences. And in the notes that I sent to you today, I talked about some of the experiences of the desert and some of the lessons that the Jewish people acquired as a result of the challenges that they faced during their 50-day trek from the borders of Egypt to Mount Sinai. But before we come to Mount Sinai, which we will really do next week, I'd like to make mention of the fact that it's not only the people who have lessons to learn. You know, we talk about this trip as if the audience, the people who are to be educated, who are to grow, who are to experience transition, as if that was just the Jewish people themselves. I would make the argument that even their leaders learn something about leadership from the experience of the wandering in the wilderness. And tonight, I think we see that Moses, the nominal messenger of God and the leader of the people, himself comes to learn certain important lessons as a result of his experiences leading the people in the wilderness. Neil, go ahead. I'm sorry. Oh, now you're off, Neil. You were on.
We can't hear.
Okay, Neil, you're off now. You were on before.
You're muted, Neil. Now you're not.
Go ahead.
No, I'm not? Okay.
You're good.
Hey, so anyways, we were talking about the lessons that were learned at the end of the session last Monday.
Correct.
And it struck me at the end, and maybe some of the people that were in Joshua also may have got this, that us looking away from God, getting in trouble and coming back in, and that was a reoccurring theme even through Joshua. And we haven't got there now, but from our class that we did in Joshua, it seemed like that was a reoccurring theme. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it's over with at this point.
No, it's certainly not over with. It's actually a recurring theme in life, not only for Jews, but for everybody. The truth of the matter is, I'm sorry.
Did you hit record?
Yes, I did hit record. The truth of the matter is that this is a lesson that we are constantly learning in life. We don't progress in necessarily a straight interrupted line, Neil. We progress through making mistakes, through falling victims to certain challenges that we face. And as a result of our failures and our repairing the defects in the way we have been living, we monitor, we travel a different course. All life is a journey. And the truth of the matter is journeys consist of both successes and failures, and hopefully we learn from our failures. So the story of the Jewish people, whether we're talking about the Exodus from Egypt, or whether we're talking about the experiences of Joshua and the people of his time, or whether we're talking about the people of Samuel in his time, is a series of recurring experiences that we have, which challenge us, which force us to face some of the wrong decisions we have made, and that provide a kind of a course correct that enable us to move into a more productive direction. Now, those kinds of lessons can be learned by regular people, and they can be learned by leaders as well. And in chapter 18, the recipient of this lesson is actually none other than Moses. Moses is really the topic or the main figure in this particular portion, although he shares the limelight with a man called Jethro, who is identified on a number of occasions in this short passage as Moses' father-in-law. Just to remind those of you who didn't recall who Jethro was, you'll remember that when Moses flees Egypt and he escapes the wrath of Pharaoh because he had slain an Egyptian in his young adulthood, when Moses comes to the land of Midian, he befriends a group of women. He is taken in by their father, who was a priest of Midian, a man by the name of Jethro. And then Moses marries one of Jethro's daughters, a woman by the name of Yocheved. I just want to check here. I'm sorry, not Yocheved. Zipporah. Zipporah is his wife. He makes his wife Zipporah. He marries. He has 2 children while he is with Zipporah, while he's tending his father-in-law's sheep. And then at a certain point, while tending the flocks of his father-in-law, he comes upon the burning bush on Mount Sinai, and that's where he receives his commission. And from there, Moses returns to Egypt, where he is charged by God with speaking to Pharaoh and demanding Pharaoh release God's people so that they can serve him. Now, at the time of Moses's commission, he does not actually end up taking his wife and his children with him to Egypt, or if he does, according to some commentators, he quickly sends them back home. He realizes he's going to be in Egypt for some time. He realizes that it's going to be a rather tumultuous period of time. And at a certain point, Moses sends back Zipporah, his wife, and his 2 sons back to her father, back to Jethro. And that's where we meet Jethro in today's portion. Moses has brought the Jewish people out of Egypt. They have crossed the Red Sea. They have been traveling in a southerly direction toward Sinai, toward Mount Sinai, which was a general vicinity of where his father lived and where he attended the sheep. And when Moses comes to a certain point on his return journey to Sinai, suddenly it is announced to him that his father-in-law has come to the camp. And who does his father-in-law bring with him? But his wife, Zipporah, and his 2 sons, Gershom and Eliezer. So as our portion begins, as the chapter 18 begins, Moses meets Jethro, and he proceeds to tell him what has happened. Jethro has, by the way, already heard about the events of the past 10 months. Everybody has heard about it. The news as to what has happened in Egypt over the course of the plagues has spread outside of Egypt. The world roundabout has heard how these Hebrew slaves have managed to force Pharaoh to let them go. So when Jethro meets his son-in-law and says, we have heard what happened, we've heard the stories of the miracles that occurred in Egypt, Moses gives him a fuller account. Moses kind of provides him the background detail. He tells him some of the details of the experience over the past 10 months. And in response to Moses' story, Jethro acknowledges God's power. He says, surely, this God is a powerful God. Jethro, who is a priest of another deity, acknowledges the power of the God of Israel. And with that, and presenting Moses, his wife, and his 2 sons, Jethro stays for a while, and then he kind of disappears from the scene. But he stays long enough to observe a day in the life of Moses, all right? So while he is visiting his son, Jethro has the opportunity to observe Moses in action. And what Jethro sees does not meet with his approval. Jethro, after observing what's going on in the camp, he has some problems. He has some suggestions to make. And to his credit, even though, I mean, he's a wiser man, he's an older man, he's a priest of Midian. But in this case, now he's the subsidiary character. It's not Moses who's secondary anymore. Moses is now the leader of an entire people. Jethro dares to suggest to his son-in-law, look, I've been observing what's been happening, and it occurs to me that things are not happening correctly here. I have a couple of suggestions to make to you, and this is how the portion begins. And this is where Moses is going to become now not the teacher, but the student, and learn a little bit from his father-in-law. So as we begin today, that's the recap. Would someone like to tell me Jethro's main problem with what he observes in the life of the people as he watches his son-in-law? Go ahead, Mike. I see your hand.
Yes, I did.
Oh, you have done.
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
Okay, good. Okay. And I went through chapter 18 a number of times, and because it's called Yitro, which is Jethro. And as you mentioned already in your presentation right now, his name comes up many, many, many times. And that's a little unusual to my reading, that why all of a sudden this one character in the story has to be mentioned so many times,
Yeah.
And I'm assuming from my understanding of what I'm reading and what you've just told, the way that he's observing Moses' reaction to the people and the people's problems and whatever, that he's suggesting a new way to manage this, have lower courts and higher courts, etc., and so forth. And the big decisions, God will take care of because Moses will ask God about it. And
Good question, Mark. And I
to the point where I'm thinking that Jethro kind of saw the light or was given the light to give to Moses. To
All
say,
right.
hey, this is it.
All right.
It's like God micromanaging Moses.
Okay, it's a good question. It's a wonderful observation. I see that Mark was ready to respond, and I will let him respond in a moment. Let me say that there are not too many Torah portions in our Hebrew, and not too many portions in the Torah that are named for non-Jews. As a matter of fact, very, very few of them. 2 immediately come to hand. The 2 portions that are named for non-Jews, one is called Yitro. Yitro is, of course, Moses' father-in-law. Let's see, I had a second one. There's a portion called Pinchas. Balak, right, the portion Balak. So first of all, Mike, your first question is, why does Yitro warrant being the one named for the Torah portion? In other words, we would normally assume that a non-Jew, even the father-in-law of Moses, would warrant having a Torah portion named after him. So that's the first question. What distinguishes Yitro? And you point out, Mike, that Yitro is not an incidental character, and some of you others, including my wife Randy, pointed out the Yitro's name is mentioned quite a few times. Not only his name, but his relationship to Moses. So, Mark Goodman, did you have a response to Mike's question?
Well, I think the question you asked is what is Yitro's role? And his role is to teach delegation to Moses.
All right. So he does have a role. He does have a lesson to teach. In one word, we're going to explore what delegation means, but that is his role. But why is that so important? I mean, all right. So he makes a valid point. And we'll go back and we'll look at that point in a little bit more detail. But why is it so important that it takes up an entire chapter of the Torah? Okay. I mean, why is that such a prominent point in our telling of the story, Mark?
Well, just to get back to why is the parasha named after Yitro?
Mhm.
All the Parshiot are named after a word or phrase in the first or second sentence of the Parsha. So, I
Mhm.
mean,
Correct.
that's the answer to that question.
Okay.
It's important because it's an important lesson for Moses is that he needs to, he's not going to get his role, he's not going to get his job done if he takes on all the responsibility for everything himself.
All right. So, there's a saying question that the rabbis raise in Pirkei Avot. Ezehu chacham, who is wise? And the answer the rabbis give is he who learns from all people, from all men. Wisdom does not only come from Jews. Wisdom does not only come from even the word of God, although that certainly is the major source of wisdom in Jewish life. Wisdom can come from any human being who is a keen observer. So as Mark points out, one doesn't have to be a Moses or, another important Hebrew figure to be a source of wisdom or understanding. The lesson that Yitro has to teach is an important lesson. And it's interesting that it's coming from a non-Jew, a non-Israelite, I should say, and coming from a man who has very little background in the tradition, the faith that this people is going to espouse. So that the first lesson is that Yitro has something important to say, and yes, Mark is correct. The title Yitro takes its title from one of the first significant words in the portion. Anybody else? Hal, go ahead.
Just the interesting thing is, and you all touched on it, is that basically Moses was a micromanager and did too much. And Yitro, my son's bar mitzvah portion,
Yes, yes.
Yes.
observed this. And he basically, in so many words, said, you need to deal with the major decisions and, quote, delegate other issues to, quote, capable men. In other words, you could do the big stuff and find a cadre of others to adjudicate the other stuff. And of course, the other part of this, which makes the Parsha so special, is the establishment, first time, of a judicial system among the people.
Okay. All right. So as Hal points out, again, as have others already, the importance of not taking on too great a task all by oneself, because first of all, it wears you down. It wears down the people who are attendant upon you because you're the only one handling. And imagine the bureaucratic backup when you have only one person handling all these affairs and the people are forced to wait around for decisions for one person to make an answer. There are a lot of there are a lot of structural problems with the kind of leadership that Moses seems to be displaying when his father-in-law observes the camp for a day. And so now let's take a look at those problems in greater detail. I have a series of questions for you I'd like you to respond to. After observing his son-in-law for a day, Yitro comes to Moses and says, look, I understand what you're trying to do. I understand what you're trying to accomplish and the difficulty of it. But it seems to me that the methodology you are employing, the way you are choosing to handle this administrative problem is really counterproductive. You are not operating as efficiently and effectively as you can. And he suggests that Moses's way of handling the people is defective. It impacts upon negatively a number of people in a number of ways. So let's deal with these questions. What is Jethro's concern with the way Moses interacts with the people? And I think that all of you have already spoken, have analyzed the problem already. You have suggested that the problem is that Moses is taking on too much, that he is not delegating any responsibility to anybody else. And as a result of that fact, he is not being as effective a leader as he might otherwise be. I think we all agree on. But now let me come to question number 2. Who is Jethro? Who is Yitro? Who is he concerned about? Who does he feel suffers in this form of leadership that Moses seems to be displaying? In other words, who who is he concerned for? Does anybody want to suggest who his concern is extended to? Who is he worried about? Okay, Howard, go ahead.
About his daughter.
All right, it's interesting. It may be his daughter. He doesn't say that. But it'd be interesting if he says, "Here, Moses, I brought back your daughter and your sons, and you're wearing yourself out. You're there from morning until evening. And why did I bring your wife and your sons back? What kind of a family life are they going to have if you're not there anymore?" It doesn't say anything about that, but that is a fascinating. Thank you, Howard. I hadn't even considered that. That is a fascinating take. It would be natural that Yitro would be concerned about his own daughter, Tzipporah, and his two grandsons, Gershom and Eliezer. What kind of a life was my daughter going to have? What kind of a family life will Moses have if he wears himself out day after day, tending to the affairs of his people? He's going to have a really crummy family life. And like many people who are in positions of importance and responsibility, he's going to give everything away at the office. He's going to expend his best energy at the office. And the shoemaker whose children have no shoes, his family is going to get the worst of the situation. So Howard, that's brilliant. I've never thought about that before. All right, so Howard suggests that Yitro was worried about his daughter and his grandchildren. Anybody else want to suggest another person that Moses may have been worried about? Go ahead, Howard.
Well, my answer is not as brilliant as Howard, but I believe he was concerned about Moses and the people that he was adjudicating problems for. So he was concerned with both Moses and the people.
All right. And actually, Harvey, the words that Yitro offers suggest that, because when he speaks to Moses, he says to Moses, "What is this thing that you do to the people? Why do you sit alone with the people, standing by you from morning until evening?" And then Yitro goes on to say, "The thing that you do is not good. You will surely become worn out, you as well as the people with you." So Harvey's answer is, all right, maybe he was concerned about his daughter and his grandsons, but maybe he was also concerned about Moses and the people. Look, Moses, what you're doing here, you can't keep it up. You can't keep burning the candle at both ends. Eventually, this is going to get to you. You're not going to be effective. And in the end, you're not going to be able to handle other kinds of problems that arise. Or, he is saying, as Harvey says, the people. How long do you expect the people to sit and wait on you? You're going from morning until evening. People have issues. Maybe some of them can't get in. Maybe they have to wait 4 or 5 or more days in order to be able to approach you with their problems. You're not only wearing yourself out, you are also putting the people in a position where they have to, wait for you, and an inordinate amount of time. You're wearing them out. Lori, go ahead.
I'm thinking that maybe Moses didn't think about delegating because this was the word from God and that he had to follow whatever God told him. So maybe Moses didn't even think that was an option to delegate, that he had to absorb the weight of all the decision-making on his own shoulders.
Very good, Lori. Very good. That's the problem with being a prophet. If God speaks to you and tells you to handle things, you think you have to handle it all by yourself. God wasn't speaking to anyone else. God wasn't talking to anybody else but Moses. Unfortunately, Moses may have felt, who can I delegate this to? I'm the one who's charged with being the leader of the people. I'm the one who has to answer their questions, to respond to the problems that arise. I can't delegate. No one has the information that's necessary. It all falls on me. So what Lori is saying is, Moses may feel, I'd love to be able to get rid of some of the responsibility, but how on earth can I do that? They're not prophets. They're not speaking with God. God is speaking to me. I'm the one who's charged with this responsibility. How can I possibly delegate this and place this on the shoulders of others? Excellent. Any other points? Every one of your points is great. Any other observations? Gail, go ahead.
But it occurs to me that it probably would not be good for the people to see Moses wasting his time at very unimportant issues. Best for them to see that his leadership is in leading them in, as Jethro points out, in issues that have to do with God or have more importance.
Yeah, of course, my problems are of the most importance to me. So long as Moses is listening to me, he's dealing with an important problem. But when he's dealing with my neighbor whose problems aren't important to me, then he's dealing with unimportant details. If you've ever dealt with a bureaucrat who spends a lot of time in a line with someone who seems to be asking silly questions, and you say, why doesn't he just get rid of that person and answer my problem, which is important? You understand some of the frustration that Gail is talking about as these people see Moses trying to handle these various kinds of problems that are addressed to him. They're saying, well, he's wasting his time on those problems. He should be listening to my problem. So it's having an impact upon his relationship with the people as a whole. Is there anybody else being affected, by the way, besides Moses and the people? Go ahead, Mark.
Well, I think it's interesting. I think maybe the reason Moses doesn't delegate on his own is Moses only does what God tells him to do. And God didn't tell him to delegate. And so why doesn't God tell Moses to delegate? Why does it take this heathen priest to come in and tell Moses to delegate?
All right. And we are going to come back to Mark's question. I am not going to ignore it. Actually, it's the elephant in the room, Mark, okay? Because the question Mark is asking is, if Moses has been charged with this responsibility and God is so specific about how Moses is to do things, Mark is saying, why did it take his father-in-law Yithro to come and give us rather practical instruction to Moses? Why didn't God immediately charge Moses and tell him this is how you're supposed to do it? So Mark is saying, why is this problem even being, why didn't God himself address what was the obvious problem? Why did it take this foreign priest, Yithro, to point it out? Excellent, Mark. We're going to come back to that. You have a response. Go ahead.
And by the way, God is later going to make that point. I think it's in Pinchas, where he talks about how to organize the military, leaders of 10, leaders of 100, leaders of 1,000. So maybe God learned from Yithro.
All right, perfect. We'll explore that in just a little bit. All right, but let me ask a question. We've talked about the impact Moses's actions have on Moses, on the people, okay, on Jethro's daughter and grandchildren, on his family. We're leaving out someone. Who are we leaving out that we're not talking about? There is another layer here that is impacted by Moses' style. Go ahead, Lori.
Aaron?
Aaron, in a sense, yes, but what does Aaron represent?
Well, his support
Okay.
system.
Joseph?
To me, the main issue or problem is that Moses is the leader of an entire nation.
Right.
He takes on this doing everything.
What's the problem with that, Joseph?
And when he's doing everything, then the nation depends only upon Moses for all.
Everything.
And if Moses ever dies or goes away, the
Very
nation
good.
would be a vacuum. So I would think that, Moses should realize at some point that his main job is to develop the new leadership of Israel.
Very good.
And that would be the main job of being the leader of a nation.
Being the leader of a nation isn't doing everything yourself. It's cultivating leadership in people who follow you. See, the problem is not just for Moses and the people. As long as Moses doesn't do something to cultivate responsibility and leadership in other potential leaders of the people, he is not fulfilling his task, you see? Because Moses ultimately has to teach people how to be autonomous, how to assume authority for themselves. If Moses has to do it all, then he becomes indispensable to the task. Then if he disappears for any length of time, as he will, then the people are suddenly thrown into confusion and consternation because suddenly their one sole leader, their one sole authority, their one sole mouthpiece is gone. If Moses does everything and Moses disappears, then the people can turn nowhere, right? Moses is failing the other potential leaders of the Jewish people, the tribal leaders, the other people in the tribes, by failing to share the burden of leadership and teach others how to assume responsibility. Moses is creating the kind of situation which in the future, in a power vacuum caused by his own disappearance, can lead to great catastrophe for the entire Jewish people, okay? So we see here that he is not only not doing himself any favors, he is not only doing the people no good by causing them to have to sit and wait upon him alone, he is failing to develop the potential amongst the other leaders of the Jewish people to take responsibility and to share with Moses the burden of leadership. Does everybody agree so far? We're good so far. Good, you're all doing very, very well. All right, so now having identified what the problem is, the burden of taking on leadership on his own and the failure to share or to delegate responsibility, and having identified who the people are who are being hurt by Moses's inability to share or his lack of sharing that responsibility with others, let us turn to Jethro's own suggestions. What does Jethro suggest as a solution to the problem that he observes? He observes it, he sees it, he takes it upon himself to speak to his son-in-law. He gets up the chutzpah, he says, you know, God didn't speak to me to run this nation. You're the leader. God clearly works through you. But if you'll take my suggestion in hand, of course, with the endorsement of God, I'd like to offer you some suggestions, okay? What is Jethro's suggestion as to the problem of Moses's style of leadership? Okay, Leslie, go ahead.
He tells them to find the elders or the leaders and have them divide into thousands, 10,000s, hundreds, tens, fives, whatever, and delegate it that way.
Perfect. Moses, appoint other people who are going to share with you the burden of leadership. Do not take this on your own. Do not assume this burden only upon your shoulders, but share with other people the responsibilities for being leaders, okay? And that is precisely what Yitro's advice is, Leslie. You are correct. He suggests that Moses can help himself, help the people, and improve the nature of the organization as a whole by sharing leadership. Moses seems to hear what his father-in-law says, right? He seems to take his father-in-law's suggestion. We do not hear that he goes back to God at this point, okay? His father-in-law suggests, may I make a suggestion? And if God endorses it, please take my suggestion seriously. But Moses never does go back to God to say, oh, by the way, my father-in-law made this suggestion. Is it all right if I do that? Moses, the moment he hears it, seems to instantly recognize that his father-in-law is correct. Look what it says. It says, let's see here, let me find the portion. Okay, yes. So Yitro makes a suggestion. Select certain individuals. We're going to come to the criteria in just a second of what those individuals have to be. Select certain men and let them bear with you the responsibility for leadership. If you do this thing, Jethro says, and if God so commands you, then you will be able to endure, you and the entire people as well. And then it says, Moses heeded the voice of his father-in-law and did everything he said. Moses doesn't turn to God. Moses doesn't second guess. He does it. Why? Why? You might have assumed that Moses wouldn't, but why does Moses' immediate reaction, he's right? Anybody want to respond to that? Moses immediately takes Jethro's suggestion. Why? Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, well, Jethro's a leader in his own right. He's got his own plan. And, he obviously is aware of that and is aware how well that worked. And says, fine, I never thought about using, your ideas in my plan.
Jethro is not only a priest of Midian, he's the head of a clan. He's the head of a tribe. He has his own flocks and herds and his own retinue. What Mike is saying is, give credit to where credit's due. Moses recognizes that Yitro, his father-in-law, is a leader as well. And he sees that the practical wisdom his father-in-law has gained over his years immediately makes sense. You know a good idea when it comes. Sometimes the moment you hear something, even if you haven't thought about it before, even if you've been doing it differently, and someone says, can I make a suggestion? And they make a suggestion and you think instinctively, he's right. Why didn't I see this? Why didn't I catch this? Moses hears Yitro's words, sees the wisdom in his father-in-law's suggestion, and doesn't go back to God to ask for permission to change the system, which leads me to believe that God had never instructed Moses in a system at all. Okay, God had never told Moses to operate this way. Where did Moses think that he had to do it all? Oh, God spoke to me. I'm the prophet. I'm the leader. I got to make all the decisions. The fact that Moses didn't go back to God meant that God never told him how to do this anyway. Moses was kind of operating by the seat of his pants. And he therefore, when he hears this, says, what am I doing? Of course, my father-in-law's right. Joseph, go ahead.
This part of the chapter makes me appreciate and love Moses even more. Because here's Moses, defeated Pharaoh, God is at his side. He communicates directly with God like no one in history ever has, a personal relationship with God. I've known so many people in business, the right hand of the CEO who you couldn't talk to because here Moses listens to Jethro and God is talking to him all the time. He has no ego. Moses, to me, it demonstrates he has no ego whatsoever and he's going to do the right thing. He's going to listen to everyone and do the right thing. It makes me love him even more.
Me as well. And it's that lack of ego. There are some people who might be threatened if you question their leadership style. Might be some people who say, you're questioning how I'm doing this. I'm the Moses, I'm the prophet, I'm the leader, I'm responsible. He might have reacted defensively to his father-in-law's suggestion. What Joseph is saying is, he takes his ego out of it. He says, he's made an observation. It's a good observation. It addresses a real problem that I see. Of course, I'm going to listen to him. Not even a question. Go ahead, Lori.
And I think he also trusts him completely. So he's not questioning his authority. He's not questioning what he's done in the past, that he trusts him and he sees that he's a credible source, that he is successful and that he has the right to believe him.
Right. Not only does Jethro have the knowledge based on experience, Lori is saying, but his motivation, Lori is saying, is good. Moses has no reason to believe that Jethro is in this for any other reason than the good of Moses and the people. It seems like his father-in-law's motivation is to make the situation better. And therefore, Moses is perfectly open to taking his father-in-law's advice. Yes, he is right. There is no reason I have to do this myself. I don't even have to go to God to ask for permission because God never told me to do it this way. I instantly see that I have to share the responsibility. So now Moses is in the position to pick out those individuals. And his father-in-law, what I love about Jethro is he not only suggests how the problem should be solved, he says to Moses, by the way, if you're looking for good men, I have a suggestion as to what to look for. There are plenty of people who are around to tell you things are not working out, you're screwing up. A lot of people like that. There are some people who are around to say to you, all right, you're screwing up. This is what you've got to do, but they offer very general, non-specific advice. But Yitro points out to Moses what's going wrong, why it's not effective, suggests an answer, right, Lori? He suggests appoint other people to share the burdens of leadership with you, and then goes on to list the criteria Moses should look for in these people who are going to share leadership. I'd like to turn to that aspect of the question right now. What criteria does Jethro suggest Moses look for in his attempt to select people to share with him the burdens of leadership? In other words, Jethro says, look, don't take this upon yourself. There have got to be other capable people among the nation who can share this burden with you. I suggest that you identify those people, whether Moses identifies them himself or he turns to other tribal leaders. Moses. Okay, let me get. Okay, he suggests that. All right. Well, I've lost. Mark, go ahead. Mark, you had a question.
But I already spoke.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. So he says, Jethro says, all right, I'm going to give you the criteria. Let me read to you what Jethro says, and then I'm going to ask you why these particular criteria. This is what Jethro says. You shall discern among the entire people men of accomplishment, God-fearing people, men of truth, people who despise money, and you shall appoint them as leaders. All right, so those are the criteria. So let's go through them one at a time and try and determine what these criteria are. To begin with, Jethro says, men of accomplishment, Anshe Chayil. What does that mean and why is that important? Anybody? And you remember to unmute yourself if you're talking, because we just muted you again. Okay, go ahead, Joseph.
Men of accomplishment have proven a capability.
All right. We don't want novices here. Men who have already demonstrated by their acts. Joseph is suggesting men of accomplishment, men who have achieved something. Why those men? Because they're already going to be recognized as successful men. I might have said successful men, men of accomplishment, men who have a reputation among the people for being wise, for being leaders. It may be a tribal leader, it may not be. To be a successful man or a man of accomplishment doesn't necessarily mean you are a designated leader. There are plenty of people who are designated leaders who have no accomplishments to speak of. But let it be a man who has achieved something. Anybody else have anything to add on the criterion of men of accomplishment? What else does it mean, men of accomplishment, besides successful individuals? What else could it mean? Go ahead, Lori.
People who not only have the intelligence to make decisions, but also who take the initiative to know what to do and to plan things out and to be organized and are credible among the people who have natural authority. So, I mean, not everybody has that to be a leader, but if you don't, then you're not going to lead the people if you don't have those qualities.
If you do not have those qualities, if you do not have a reputation for being such a person, Lori is saying people are less likely to listen to you. They're less likely to pay attention to you if you haven't displayed in your life, either by means of your accomplishments, your achievements, your success. Maybe these are men who have been successful because of their wisdom or their understanding. Whatever it is that makes them men of achievement, they have demonstrated in their life up until now that they have the qualities that will make them, other people listen to them and take them seriously. Anybody else? Hal, go ahead.
I think the Art Scroll has better explanation. I used the Etz Chaim this week, but in chapter 21, it basically said, men of sufficient wealth that they will be immune to bribes or financial considerations. In other words, I guess wealth was linked to accomplishment, also morally upstanding, people who can do what is right. And then an interesting quote, doing what is right in God's sight will be more important for them than popularity among their neighbors. In other words, don't do the popular thing that the mob wants, do what is right and moral.
Right. Now, some of these will come under other categories that we will explore. But when it comes to men of accomplishment, one of the signs of a man of accomplishment might be, as Hal suggests, certain monetary position. That would be important if you were a judge. If you were a judge, one of the things you fear is that people who are motivated solely by profit might not make the best judges if they are men who are avaricious, who have never been a success themselves, who are looking to enrich themselves at the public expense. So Hal is suggesting that men of achievement might not only mean men who have been successful in life and who have achieved a certain level of fame, but Hal is suggesting men who have attained a certain level of prosperity, of self-sufficiency, that they're going to be less enticed by other considerations like bribery or wealth. Mike, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I looked at this as the lowest level of judge, if you will. These are people who have had these simple problems themselves in life and have known how to fix them and can advise other people who are coming to them with simple problems. So
Okay.
that's people have had.
Okay. If you're going to be help to other people, it would be helpful if in your life you have confronted some of these problems yourself and had to struggle with them. Men of achievement are usually people who have faced these kinds of challenges or questions and have the experience to deal with them. Good. All right. All right. Yes, go ahead, Larry.
They'd be respected.
Very good. They would be respected. We tend to follow the advice of people we respect. If we respect a person, if we respect his position, his achievements, his accomplishments, his station in life, we're more likely, when he or she attempts to give us direction, we're more likely to follow his suggestions. And by the way, you'll notice I keep saying his. We can explore that later on if you like, but we are dealing here obviously with all men. All right, let me go to the second category. God-fearing men. Okay, we've talked about men of achievement. What is revealed to you? What do you think is implied by the expression God-fearing men? Yeah.
Okay,
Okay, go ahead, Randy.
okay, I don't think that it's fearing God as much as following God's word.
Okay, why is that important?
Well, because you're following commandments and you're following a certain path in life. I don't think that we're meant to. I think if we fear God, that's a weakness rather than a strength.
Okay. And by God-fearing, just so we clear this up, it doesn't mean men who are perpetually afraid of God. Men who, a better way of expressing it, Randy is correct, is men who revere the Lord. Okay, instead of God-fearing men, men who revere the Lord. Okay, and that is the criteria we want. We want men who are going to do what is right, irrespective of what other people say, because they do what's right. Okay. If I only do what's right in the eyes of God, I will not pay attention to the conventional wisdom around me. I will understand what God expects. I will hold tight to this standard of judgment, the standard of judgment, and I will not allow myself to be affected by other people's opinion. If I am truly God-fearing, I'm going to do what is correct. Glory, go ahead. Lori, your sound is down.
Oh,
There you go.
okay, let me just bring me up. Okay. Judges who are subject to a divine authority will not be swayed by flattery, bribery, or threats. So they have confidence in their own opinions to not be swayed or bribed.
Okay. If I believe that I am judging on God's behalf, Lori, if I believe that I am interpreting God's word, I'm not going to be swayed by what other people think. I'm going to the best of my ability to try and do what God expects, right? You want men who are unafraid, who are unintimidated by anything else but what God expects of them, all right? So you would not want, none of us would want to be judged by people who have no respect or awe for God. We would want to always be judged by people who take who derive their sense of values from their belief in a moral and ethical God. We would not want it any other way. Okay. Now, in addition to that, it says men of truth. What is this aspect of it? Men of truth. What does that mean? Anybody? They all tie together. They all are ways of saying something like the same thing. But what does this expression, men of truth, imply? Okay. How can you, if you are a man of truth, how does this influence you to be a better leader of men, a better judge, a better, what is, if you are a man of truth, what does that mean? What can get in the way of truth? Someone tell me, I'll phrase it this way. Let me rephrase it. What can get in the way of being a person of truth? What might influence you to not be such a good leader or such a good judge? If you are a man of, if you're God-fearing, that's one thing. Well, what does it mean if you're a man of truth? It's going to make sure you stay on the straight and narrow. Go ahead, Mark, and then Larry. Mark, your silence.
I'm going to suggest perhaps self-interest.
All right, self-interest. You know, and by self-interest, not just bribery, but other kinds of self-interest. If someone flatters me and someone says, oh, you're such a wonderful person, you're such a wonderful individual, I love studying with you, I love your insights, you're absolutely great. And then I have a case in my court, or I'm trying to decide. Flattery can be a form of an insidious form of undermining the area of truth. It might be that flattery, not outright bribery even, just flattery, just influence, things, that good feelings that the person and I are good friends, and that person has always done good things for me in the past. It might be that inadvertently, even without intending it, I let that past relationship, that flattery, that admiration get in my way of being effective. I've got to be a man of truth, which means even if a person who appears before me as a friend or I have a personal interest in him, I cannot let that determine my way. Mark, did you want to say something else?
No.
Oh, okay. Anybody else? Go ahead, Larry. I'm getting a little background noise here. Yeah, I'm getting a little background noise here. Okay, we're going to mute everybody again, and then Larry, unmute yourself. Go ahead. Go ahead, Larry.
They don't let emotion get involved in their decisions.
Okay, what kind of emotion, Larry, might you let? What kind of emotions would you have to guard yourself against?
With their own feeling towards any one individual.
Very good. And those feelings might be good feelings. Let's say two men come before me in a case, in a judicial case, and one man is very rich and very successful, and the other man is struggling to make a living. He's poor. He's having difficulty in life. And let's say I listen to the case and I decide, it's a rich man who's really right. It's the man with the influence. He's right. But the other poor guy's a schnook, and the rich guy can afford to pay him a little bit more. Why shouldn't I give him the benefit of the doubt? You see, a judge can't be that way. Even if I'm motivated by mercy or consideration for the weaker party, that's not being a man of truth. If I am a man of truth, when a case comes before me for adjudication, when a decision comes before me to decide between two individuals, I have to decide the merits of the case on the basis of what I hear and what I see. And even taking into account the ability of the rich man to be able to afford the judgment, maybe if I find in the favor of the poor, even if the poor isn't right, the rich man, it's not going to cost him anything. You see, I'm not being a man of truth anymore. I'm allowing my own personal sympathy to sway me to do not really justice, to do something else, all right? So these men of truth have to be interested in the administration of justice and anything that affects their ability to administer judgment, whether it's pride, whether it's envy, whether it's mercy even, anything that gets in the way of my being able to render a fair judgment, being able to lead people and make the correct judgment between one person and another, one group or another, anything that gets in my way affects me as a man of truth. And finally, the last category, I'm not even going to bother spending much time with it. people who despise money. That doesn't mean you have to hate money. It just means you can't be motivated by monetary privilege. And that's obvious. Anybody who might be swayed by financial considerations, which, by the way, is the failing of so many of our politicians and leaders today. I would say power corrupts. Some people fall victim to power. They take advantage of their power over others. They're involved in acquiring more power, or they engage in sexual indiscretions because they have this ability to influence other people. There are lots of reasons why people, men of leadership, go astray. They buy into their own myth, and they use that power in adverse ways. But many people are corrupted by wealth and by money. They see their positions as an opportunity to enrich themselves, and they will do everything and anything they can do while they are in a position of power to guarantee that they make as much money or acquire as much power, monetary power, as possible in order to guarantee their own personal well-being and survival. Okay, those are the criteria. Okay, so Jethro has now laid it out. He said to Moses, look, Moses, if you follow my suggestion, look for the right individuals. And I'm going to give you some suggestions here. If you can find among the people who are with you in the camp, if you can find individuals who meet these criteria, select them to share the burden of leadership with you and let them do it together with you. Okay? All right. All very good. But there is one obvious problem we have here that none of you have commented on. Okay? And as soon as I say it, you're going to all say, of course. But here is the problem. And the problem goes back actually to Mark's original statement. What are we talking about here? On what basis is Moses sitting from morning until evening judging the people? Someone want to tell me the standard that Moses is using? Leslie?
Moses is using what he thinks God would say.
Yeah, but how does Moses know, Leslie, what God is going to say?
I don't know, but he's speaking to him, or he's making judgments that he thinks God would want.
All right.
There's no leeway in there.
Right. Moses is completely, Moses doesn't know what God wants. So how is Moses possibly judging these people? How is Moses deciding these cases? Somebody tell me. What's missing here? What's missing?
Moses is using his own judgment.
There's no law here.
Right.
There's no law to administer. There is no legal system. So some of you might have said, wait a second. I don't remember that Moses receives the 10 Commandments. I don't remember that God gave Moses any laws to govern the people. The thing that should hit you square in the face is, what the heck is Moses doing? God hasn't given him the Torah. God hasn't given him any laws. When the people come to him, how is Moses making decisions? If you got no law and you have no standards and you don't know what God expects of you, is Moses making up the laws as he goes along? Anybody want to respond to the obvious problem here with he's administering a judicial system that doesn't exist? Okay, that's a little bit of a problem. Moses is in charge of a judicial system that doesn't exist. Someone want to solve that problem for me? Go ahead, Gail.
Well, I don't think I can solve the problem, but what about the leaders of all the tribes? How did they adjudicate issues among people?
They can't. If Moses doesn't know, how are they supposed to know?
But they must have done so.
All right, so tell me how.
If two men went to the leader of their particular tribe and said, Hal stole my cow.
But remember, these people up until 50 days ago or less than 50 days ago have been slaves. They haven't adjudicated, Gail, anything.
They must have amongst themselves some way, I would think.
I don't know. What would slaves have to adjudicate among other slaves? I don't know. Did they have a legal system as slaves? Did they govern anything in their lives? What was the function of an elder or a leader? They might have been prominent men. They might have been men of renown in their community, but they didn't administer any law. They were slaves to Pharaoh. What possibly could they administer? Leslie, go ahead.
Well, maybe they knew how to mediate with each other or, make decisions, collaborate in some way.
All right, all right. So what is it that they're really, when they mediate or when they collaborate or when they make decisions, Leslie, what are they really determining these decisions by?
Probably either precedent or, arguing back and forth and the merits of one thing against another.
Okay, good. Neil, go ahead. I see your hand.
I want to back up just a little bit.
Go ahead.
They've just come out of a very traumatic experience of fleeing Egypt. And now they're kind of like, relatively speaking, they're not in that fight or flight part of their life at this point, relatively speaking.
Correct.
So now they're just sitting around and it's mob rule. Seriously.
No, I understand.
How did they come up with it? It's
Yeah.
mob rule.
Well, do you want to be judged, Neil, by mob rule?
No, I'm saying at the,
Okay, I don't
very
want to be.
beginning of this, as they evolve into having the criterion of the leaders and everything like that, it's mob rule until this process starts.
Well, but how does it change from mob rule, Neil? In other words, the leaders don't have a system of governing. There is no law yet. There is no established law. God hasn't given any commandments yet. How are the people supposed to make judgments in hearing cases or in deciding issues between members of the tribe? How are the people possibly supposed to make these kinds of judgments with no rule? Marlene? Go ahead, Neil. You can respond.
I would think that they might be puppeting what was going on in Egypt.
Yeah, but in Egypt, as slaves, they were told, this is your task, this is what you do, these are the bricks that you take. That's autocracy. If they try and pull that with their neighbors, is going to lead to problems. If they try and follow Pharaoh's form of rule, that is mob rule, or worse, it's tyrannical rule, and that will lead to revolution, Neil. That will only make matters worse.
Look, I think that his father-in-law came in at the right time, because I don't think that they had any set up to begin with.
Well, they still don't. That's the problem. My problem is they still don't. Marlene, go ahead.
My thought is their parents, they've got children. They've had to make decisions. It's not like they're just because they were slaves. They have a family.
All right. So how does that work, Marlene? You're on the right track. What do they have that they can use? Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that they've established themselves as being able to relate to their fellows in a sense of fairness. I mean, they're fair people and they're recognized as such, and they're put in a position of making that judgment for other people they don't normally see.
Okay, very good. Lori, then Mark. Go ahead, Lori.
Yeah, I was thinking on the same line that maybe they based it on what they felt their common sense was or what they thought was fair.
Very
so
good.
I agree with you on that.
Their sense of common decency, what was fair. We all have that, or hopefully we all have that. Mark, were you going to say something similar? You're still on mute, Mark. Mark, you're on mute. Okay, I'm not hearing Mark here. There you go.
I was going to remark how brilliant this is. This is the prelude to the revelation at Sinai, where the law is given. In some way, it's like the transition between Judges and Samuel. The very last line of Samuel is, there was no king in those days, and every man did what was right in his own eyes. So next we have Samuel, we get a king. This the need for a law, and it's a prelude. It really is pretty brilliant.
All right, it is brilliant. Let me refine the question a little bit more for you. If you have not got a legal standard, I'm going to put us on mute again. Okay, if you do not have a common standard and you're basing it on common sense, on a sense of fairness, on a sense of what appeals, what is just to you, That is all right, but it is not a system of judgment. I'm going to suggest to you that Moses was not deciding these issues on the basis of judgment. I'm going to repeat this to you because some of you have got to hear this to understand it. Moses was not sitting as a judicial officer. Those of you who think that this is a court proceeding and Moses is the chief justice or the head of the court, and everybody is coming to him and saying, Moses, what is the law? This case, that case. Here's our situation, my neighbor and I. What do we do, Moses? Moses can't apply the law because there is no law. Okay, there is no law. If people are coming to Moses to know what the law is, Moses can't help them at this point because God hasn't given them any law. So how is Moses, and this is my question to you, think about this. How is Moses supposed to solve conflicts among litigants who come before him if there is no law? If you think you have the answer, unmute yourself and tell me. There's only one correct answer here. There is only one correct answer. If there is no law by which to adjudicate, because the law doesn't exist, and you have people who are contending with each other and they appeal to you as the leader, as the authority, they come to you with a problem and it has to be resolved. How do you resolve the problem in the absence of law? It's a one-word answer.
Is it whatever God says?
I didn't say anything, Lori. That would help.
Okay.
I didn't say anything. Leslie?
Is he just winging it?
Winging it, but you got to base it on something. What do you do? Mike?
I'm back to the fairness again. I mean,
On what?
I'm back to fairness. Fairness.
All right, but what may appear to one person as fair may appear to the other litigant as unfair, right? If one person thinks it's fair, another person thinks it's unfair. Go ahead, Diane.
Didn't Moses have experience in his life?
He had experience in his life, but how was he supposed to judge, Diane? Here's the word.
Howard.
Howard, go ahead, Howard.
Common sense.
Common sense, yeah, but what's common? The word is compromise. It is compromise. When people come before you, especially if you have no law, you have to sit down with those people and work out a compromise. You know, sometimes there is litigation where before you can go to court, it says if you have a problem with something, you have to go, I don't know what they call these people, but before you can go to the court to adjudicate the matter, you have to agree to go to attorneys. And what are they looking for? Compromise. I want what I want. You want what you want. They come to Moses and they present their case. Moses has a sense of fairness. He has a sense of living. So what does he try and do? What solution can I come to that recognizes the rights of each of the people involved? How can I get them to compromise? If Joseph has a case against Howard, if I can sit with both of them and I can help them work through and talk through the issues and help them see their different points of view, and then if I can get them to engage in a compromise, I've solved the problem, right? Moses is not a judge here. He is trying to deal in a period before the law with how to bring about a divisive nation and get them to compromise, okay? Now, if you have ever had to try and get people to compromise, you know how hard that is to do. But you also know that you don't have to be an attorney to be a good counselor. I don't know what they call these people, whether counselors or whatnot. They're
Arbitrators.
arbitrators. Thank you, Randy. Arbitrators. This is the role of the arbitrator. The arbitrator listens. He hears. He may or may not be basing it on any kind of established book law or common law, but he says, I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. You make a point. You make a point. From your point of view, this isn't fair. From your, what can we do that will ensure that both of you walk away from this proceeding feeling as if your voices have been heard and a fair compromise can be made? This is what Moses is involved in. And by the way, that's why we have this before Torah. Moses is not administering the law here. That's why God didn't tell him what to do. God hasn't given him the law yet. That's why Jethro says, Moses, you're sitting here and you got this contentious people and they're presenting these problems to you. And you're sitting here trying to work out these compromises all day. Get other fair people, get other respected people to help you in this arbitration process. You're not the only arbiter. You're not the only person who can listen, give ear, and make suggestions and suggest compromises. I think that is the point of this passage. Leslie, did you have a question?
Well, I thought that was it, but I thought that actually Moses was not doing that. And that's why Jethro told him to get other people to do the arbitration.
I
But
think
you think
Moses,
it was Moses that was already doing it?
he was doing it, but he wasn't effective doing it alone.
Okay.
He had to listen to the case. He had to listen to both sides. He had to suggest an alternative. He had to get the parties to come together. He was doing it because he was basing it on arbitration, but he couldn't do it effectively alone. What Jethro says is, look, you're going to wear yourself and the people out if you try and do it alone. You've got to get other people to serve as arbiters with you. You got to get other leaders who are respected to share with you the burden of leadership and hear these problems and hear these cases and deal with the needs of the people, and don't try and handle it all on your own.
So that was the beginning of democracy? That was the beginning of democracy?
I don't know if it was the beginning of democracy, but it was the beginning of a sense of shared leadership, or shared responsibility, shared leadership. Democracy is really more of a form of self-government. Neil, go ahead.
This discussion at this point is really talking about what we would call today civil litigation with compromise. But what about the evil that was going on amongst the folks? There's no, that is different than compromise.
Okay. At this point, Neil, we do not face that problem. They are still within about a month out of Egypt. It's only 30 or some odd days. The main problem Moses has been having among the people, as you realize, is the lack of faith in God. And every time something goes wrong, the people are complaining, why did this happen to us? There is no civil breakdown in society. There is no society at this point. Moses is not dealing with that at this point. It's not with criminal law. It's not even with civil law. He is dealing with the normal problems that occur among a people who are living day to day. If I'm living in a group of people, there are going to be the everyday problems that come before me. And it's going to be problems of fairness. Usually it's going to be not civil litigation, because it's not litigation, it's not law. But usually there are the small little everyday problems of life where there is a perceived unfairness. Someone comes to me and says, my neighbor and I are having this difference of opinion. We're having this quarrel, and we don't know how to solve the problem. Would you help us solve the problem? And Moses says, all right, so tell me what your problem is. And each of them presents their situation as they see it. And Moses says, all right, so let's see, what can we do that recognizes the issues that you both have, so we can come up with something not only fair, but something that you're going to both agree to accept, so that you walk away friends. That's the kind of problem, Neil, we're dealing with here. We haven't hit criminal law yet, okay? That kind of society obviously is a different kind of society, but we're not there yet. Now, everybody, just note this one other thing. Very shortly, there's going to be a whole bunch of laws. What Yitro is doing is he's telling Moses, get the system in shape before the law comes. Moses, maybe God hasn't spoken to you yet about courts and judges and whatnot. But when the time comes that God gives you laws, because you're going to need laws, you're going to need to govern these people, you better have a working mechanism in place whereby the burdens of leadership and decision-making can be shared by people other than yourself. Moses, before the law, you need a structure of leadership and responsibility that's going to administer this whole thing. And this is the genius of Yitro, to go back to what Mark said originally. The genius of Yitro is that he understands that in governing a diverse people, a people with lots of issues, a populous nation, you're going to have to come up with a system in which people feel, number one, that their problems are being addressed, that their problems are being listened to and heard by people in authority, that they're being given due weight, that they're being taken seriously, and that finally, that there is some kind of a system in place when laws come that will effectively adjudicate between the parties. And then the system of men, able-bodied men, God-fearing men, men of accomplishment, men of truth, then it can work. If you have the men in place and you have the law in place, then the system works. Yitro suggests this to Moses before God ever hears it. And by the way, God seconds the command. Yitro has merely preceded God. He has only told Moses what God himself will tell Moses. It's just that Moses hasn't gotten to Sinai yet. Moses is trying to do this on the fly. He is not at Sinai yet. He is not there. God will reiterate much of what, and it's not because Yitro just observes, I don't know much about your God, but it seems to me that this method is not a method. He is merely making a practical suggestion. And so it is that in chapter 18, we anticipate what will now come in chapter 19 and 20. Now Moses and the Jewish people will stand at Sinai, and now for the first time, God will reveal a body of law, a system of behaviors, of practices, of morality, of ethics that will be administered by the future leadership together with Moses. Any other general observations? We're about an hour and 15 minutes in. Anybody else? Any other? Okay. All right. Okay. It's pretty awesome. I mean, it really is pretty awesome what we have here. All right. Now, the problem that we will be dealing with for the next 2 to 3 weeks is the following. And I want you to think seriously about it as you read chapters 19 again. Next week, we're going to concentrate on chapter 19 and the beginning of 20. Okay. I want you to think about this problem. Okay. I'll send you this question out among the questions. How does the infinite creator of the universe, who knows all things and is above all human knowledge, how does the infinite creator of the universe communicate his will to humankind? Okay. Okay. How does the infinite reveal to the finite human being what he wants? It is a major problem, right? How do we know what God wants of us? The answer, there's only a couple of answers. You might say logic, but I'm not sure that's the answer. How do we know that our logic? The only way in which God could communicate what he wants to us is through what we call revelation. Revelation. Revelation means that the infinite God in a moment in history has revealed what he wants from human beings to the human beings he wants to share that truth with. What we are going to be involved with for the next 3 weeks is the problem of revelation. How does God reveal his will, in this case, to a particular family of humanity, to the Jewish people? It will be the Jewish people's task, once they have this message from God, to spread this message throughout the entire world. That is why God is selecting the Jewish people. They are to be the vehicle through which God reveals his will to all humanity. The law that God will begin to reveal to us over these next weeks is not just for the Jewish people. It is to us immediately, and it is to us in its particularity. But this universal will is meant to be spread by the Jewish people throughout all the world. We are going to be dealing with the problem of God revealing his will to humanity, the problem of revelation. That is our subject for the next few weeks, okay? And will take us actually till the close of this semester. All right, okay.